Millionaire wanted to end her life support. Then the pregnant wife blinked and changed his fate. A single blink can change everything. Imagine a husband who stands by his wife's hospital bed, determined to end the machines that keep her alive. He's a man of power, an entrepreneur, rumored to have millions. She's pregnant, unconscious, and seemingly out of time. In the stillness of that hospital room, beneath the hum of fluorescent lights, one flicker of her eyelid shatters his plan. What follows is a tangled web of betrayal, family legacies, secret love affairs, and hidden intentions. If you think you know the shape of this tale, be prepared. A heartbeat and a blink can rewrite destiny. Gavin Blackwood stood in the stark white corridor of Providence Memorial Hospital, the smell of antiseptic burning his nostrils. His eyes were dark, the color of coffee at midnight, and so was his mood. Anyone observing him might have thought him a statue. He barely moved, he barely breathed. The doctors and nurses, bustling around him, went about their tasks in a practiced, steady dance, used to the drama of life and death that played out there daily. Yet Gavin remained an anomaly, someone who didn't quite belong in this world of unvarnished suffering. He was a wealthy entrepreneur with business holdings that stretched across continents, construction in Dubai, shipping in Singapore, real estate in New York, a chain of upscale restaurants in London. His name commanded respect in boardrooms. But now, in the hushed corridors of the hospital, all his power couldn't fix the single thing he had come here to do, decide the fate of his comatose wife, Sabrina Blackwood. They had married 3 years earlier in a ceremony that commanded front-page coverage in tabloids. The images showed Sabrina in a champagne-colored gown, Gavin in a classic tuxedo. Her smile, wide as the horizon, promised a future brimming with potential. Gossip columns deemed them the perfect power couple, fusing her philanthropic charm with his hard-nosed business savvy. But behind closed doors, all was not idyllic. Sabrina, once a teacher in a small Connecticut town, had fallen pregnant in a twist of fate that surprised them both. Yet before she could see the second trimester through, a car accident on a deserted rural road outside Dallas had left her battered and broken. There had been talk of sabotage, rumors about the quality of the roads, a possible mechanical failure. The truth had never been fully unearthed. Overnight, she slipped into a coma, and the unborn child lingered in uncertainty, too young to survive outside her womb. Standing beside the door to her room, Gavin felt a bitter pang of regret, though he wouldn't allow it to soften his features. Only his mother, the formidable Helena Blackwood, might have known how to read that subtle tension in his jaw. She had just arrived from their estate in Connecticut. Her warm brown eyes betrayed a cautious optimism, or perhaps it was simple denial. She approached Gavin, placing a hand on his shoulder, while her gaze strayed toward the thick wooden door that separated them from Sabrina. "How is she?" Helena asked softly. Gavin didn't want to reply. He'd spent the better part of 2 hours with Dr. Johanna Martinez, the lead neurologist, discussing the harsh reality of Sabrina's condition. Brain activity was minimal. The machines did most of the work. The baby still had a fighting chance, but only if Sabrina's body kept functioning. Day after day, Gavin had visited, listening to the beeps and whirs of the machines, seeing how Sabrina's chest rose and fell in a mechanical imitation of life. Yet he'd come here today with a grim purpose, to sign the papers that would end her life support. A swirl of rumors hinted that he wanted Sabrina gone. Some said it was because of a rumored affair. Others claimed he feared fatherhood. Many whispered about his empire, built on unsteady foundations, and how Sabrina's philanthropic trust threatened to overshadow his own business dealings. The press circled like vultures, but for now, they had no confirmation of anything. "She's the same," Gavin finally replied, his voice stiff. "No signs of improvement." Helena let out a sigh. "And the baby?" still holding on somehow. But the doctors aren't confident. He paused, turning to his mother. They asked me to make a decision. How long can I keep her on these machines? The question hung there, accusing him. Helena's face darkened with worry. She knew how relentless her son could be, how he valued certainty. The situation demanded a leap of faith, something that rarely factored into Gavin's decision-making process. "I want to see her," Helena said. "Stay here a moment. I want to see if she's changed at all." Stepping through the heavy door, Helena entered the hospital room, where a faint, sterile gloom settled over everything. The blinds were drawn, casting watery beams of daylight onto the floor. Sabrina's form lay motionless on the bed, tubes and wires snaking around her. There was the fourth drip pumping silent fluids into her body, monitors measuring her heart rate, a respirator ensuring oxygen. On a small table sat a framed photo of Sabrina and Gavin from better days that seemed like an entirely different lifetime. Helena approached the bed, carefully taking one of Sabrina's hands in her own. It felt cold, inanimate, like marble. Helena, not wanting to alarm Gavin, whispered under her breath, "Come back to us, Sabrina. Give us a sign." But nothing changed. Sabrina's eyelids remained closed, her body still. Gavin watched through the small window in the door. He could see Helena's shoulders trembling, as though she might be crying. In that moment, even Gavin's own hardened heart quivered. A voice in his head told him that even if she woke, she might never be the same. But another voice, the one that had grown stronger with each passing day, reminded him that it was time to move on. He had an empire to protect, a net worth fighting for. He had to think of the future. And so, with grim finality, Gavin went to the nurse's station, requesting Dr. Martinez. If fate had other plans, well, it would have to make them known quickly. Because after so many days of waiting, he was ready to put an end to this uncertain nightmare. Dr. Johanna Martinez had seen her fair share of tragedies. She had watched families shattered by sudden accidents, had overseen the removal of life support when hope was truly gone. But something about Sabrina Blackwood tugged at her conscience. Perhaps it was the mother's unwavering devotion. Perhaps it was Sabrina's youth, a woman in her mid-20s, a teacher known for her kindness, now harnessed to a ventilator. Or perhaps it was the unborn child that made each decision weigh heavier on her heart. Gavin found Dr. Martinez in her cramped office, reviewing imaging scans of Sabrina's brain. The black and white pictures told a bleak story. Significant damage to the left hemisphere, swelling that had receded but left behind a trail of irreversible trauma. She was one of the best neurologists in the region, having studied at Johns Hopkins University under revered mentors. Yet, in all her expertise, she could not guarantee any miracle for Sabrina. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Blackwood?" she asked, looking up from the scans. Gavin nodded. His face was unreadable, an executive's mask. "I'd like to move forward with terminating the life support. It's time we faced facts." Dr. Martinez set her pen aside, inhaling deeply. "Understood. I need to tell you, though, there is still a chance, slim, yes, but a chance that she might recover minimal consciousness. And the baby is still stable, albeit precariously so." He couldn't bear to hear that. Hope was dangerous. It clouded judgment. It perpetuated illusions. "Doctor, you've emphasized that the damage is extensive. Her EEGs barely flicker. Are you suggesting we hold out for a miracle?" Dr. Martinez sighed. "I'm merely stating the facts. Some patients have come out of comas after months, even years. It's not common, but it's not impossible. And with a child involved, exactly. With a child involved, if the mother's body can't sustain the pregnancy to the point of viability, we're prolonging her suffering, as well as adding undue stress to everyone, including me." She measured his words carefully. "I understand. As per hospital policy, we'll need your signature, and we also need 2 other physicians to sign off." There's a 48-hour waiting period after the forms are finalized. If you go through with this, Mr. Blackwood, there's no going back. He simply nodded. Bring me the papers. Wordlessly, Dr. Martinez took a file from her drawer. Inside were multiple forms, consent forms, disclaimers, acknowledgements. She laid them out on the table. Without any visible hesitation, Gavin scrawled his signature across the designated lines. Each stroke of the pen felt like a nail in a coffin. He was sentencing Sabrina to death, and with her, the unborn child, all because he no longer believed in the possibility of her survival, or perhaps never truly wanted it. When the last signature was complete, Dr. Martinez gathered the papers, giving Gavin a look that wavered between professionalism and moral conflict. We'll proceed accordingly, Mr. Blackwood. I'll inform the team. In 48 hours, if nothing changes, we'll remove her from life support. With that, Gavin turned and walked out. His footsteps echoed in the hallway. Every head seemed to turn and watch him, the nurses, the visitors, other doctors. Judgments lay in their eyes. Gossip about the powerful millionaire who was pulling the plug on his pregnant wife. But none of them knew the full story. None knew the painful secrets he carried, nor the precarious balancing act of his finances. And so he pushed open the glass doors at the front of the hospital, stepping out into the blazing sun, exhaling deeply as though he'd just escaped from prison. What Gavin didn't know was that behind him, Dr. Martinez was already making a call to a friend, someone who specialized in obstetrics and high-risk pregnancies. The doctor's name was Anthony Beaumont, an old colleague from medical school. If there was some protocol that might delay the process or attempt a heroic measure to save the baby, Dr. Martinez wanted to explore every option. She couldn't let go without trying everything. That same afternoon, in the quiet confines of the Blackwood estate, Helena confronted her son. She knew something deeper fueled his rush to end Sabrina's life support. She suspected that it wasn't just about sparing Sabrina from an uncertain fate. The rumor mill had churned out whispered tales of Gavin's recent questionable investments, grain shipments in Eastern Europe that never arrived, a half-built marina in Puerto Rico abandoned due to hurricane damage, a string of shady loans from mysterious overseas entities. His empire, as grand as it appeared, might have cracks forming in its foundation, and Sabrina's philanthropic trust, a separate legal entity that she had set up before they married, remained untouched by those cracks. Helena waited in the drawing room, where sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. She wore a tasteful black dress, mourning the situation but also mindful of appearances. When Gavin entered, she beckoned him closer. "You've made your decision, haven't you?" she asked quietly. He didn't bother denying it. "I have. It's time to let her go." Helena's voice quivered. "Are you even thinking about the baby? The baby is unlikely to survive. If it does, it may have serious complications." Gavin kept his tone neutral, though there was an undercurrent of frustration. "Mom, you know how these things go. We can't let emotion override facts." Helena studied her son's features. He'd always been that way, logical, resolute, sometimes cold, but he wasn't entirely without sentiment. When he had first met Sabrina, Helena remembered how he had softened, how his laughter had come easier. Something had changed. Perhaps it was the accident, or perhaps it began even before that. "I spoke to Sabrina's old friend, Elizabeth Carter," Helena said. "They were close when Sabrina was teaching in Connecticut. According to Elizabeth, Sabrina had been trying to change the trust so it would directly benefit a children's literacy program if anything happened to her. She was passionate about it." Gavin froze for a fraction of a second. "I'm aware," he said curtly, "but that's none of my concern now." "Are you sure? Because the moment Sabrina passes, that trust might revert to her stated wishes." unless there's something else you've arranged. You were never comfortable with Sabrina's philanthropic efforts. Anger flared in Gavin's eyes. Mother, I hope you're not implying that I'm pulling the plug just to get my hands on her money. Helena's gaze flickered with both worry and love for her son. I only want to ensure you're doing this for the right reasons. Sabrina deserves that. He said nothing for a moment, then turned away. We have 48 hours, Mother. If she doesn't wake by then, it's over. Upstairs, in a guest bedroom, lay a black leather briefcase. Inside that briefcase were documents that only Gavin had seen, documents tying him to unscrupulous financiers in Switzerland and the Caymans, individuals who had financed his real estate expansions at outrageous interest rates. He owed them more money than he could repay if his upcoming ventures in Asia didn't pan out. Sabrina's philanthropic trust was locked away, inaccessible to him, but if she died, the trust might pass into the control of an appointed trustee unless a different will or codicil came to light, something that might shift assets, something that Gavin had quietly orchestrated. He was not wholly evil, he was just desperate. A swirl of conflicting desires churned within him to be free of Sabrina, to claim his portion of her assets, and to maintain the polished facade of the wealthy Blackwood Empire. All those thoughts weighed on him, and in his mind the only solution was to end the life support. The unborn child was collateral damage in a dark equation. As the countdown to Sabrina's last day approached, an unlikely ally emerged. Daniel Richmond, an attorney who had once worked with Gavin, but later distanced himself due to Gavin's aggressive tactics. Daniel was known for his integrity, a trait that made him somewhat of an outlier in the cutthroat legal world. He had represented Sabrina for some of her philanthropic work, drafting documents for the literacy program she championed. Daniel received a frantic call from Helena the evening after Gavin signed the termination papers. She asked him to look into the trust documents, see if there was any legal recourse to delay removing Sabrina from life support, at least until the baby could reach viability. "Please, Daniel," Helena pleaded over the phone, her voice trembling. "I know my son can be ruthless, but Sabrina believed in hope. She believed in the good that could come from giving people a second chance. This is her own second chance. I can't let her go without trying." Daniel, who had always held a soft spot for Sabrina's benevolence, agreed to help. He knew the case was tricky. Medical decisions typically fell to the spouse. But if there were any evidence that Sabrina would have wanted to remain on life support, or any clause in her trust that addressed end-of-life care, it might be enough to stall the process. He set to work, combing through the reams of documents Sabrina had signed. He found references to do not resuscitate preferences, living wills, advanced directives, but there was nothing explicitly stating that Sabrina wished to remain on life support in the event of a coma. Then, near the bottom of a stack of filings, he came across a letter Sabrina had written to him months ago, never officially stamped or notarized, but personally signed. In it, she mentioned her pregnancy and her desire to protect the baby at all costs. She wrote, "If I'm ever in a position where I cannot advocate for myself, please ensure that my child is given every chance to live." Daniel's heart pounded. Though the letter wasn't a formal directive, its authenticity was evident in the way Sabrina's gentle voice shone through. That letter might be the key to persuading a judge that Sabrina would have chosen differently than Gavin. Because if Sabrina's unborn child could still survive, the law might prioritize the child's right to life over a spouse's decision to terminate life support. It was a legal gray area, but Daniel was willing to try. Morning dawned on the day before Sabrina was scheduled to be taken off the respirator. Tension in the hospital soared. 2 more physicians had added their signatures, consenting that Sabrina's condition was grave and unlikely to improve. All the paperwork was lined up. Nurses had begun the protocols for withdrawal of life support, but Dr. Martinez kept glancing at Sabrina's chart with a restless urgency. She had seen comatose patients make minimal improvements, but none of the standard measures indicated Sabrina was doing so. Yet, Dr. Martinez couldn't shake the feeling that Sabrina was hovering near the edges of consciousness. Twice, Dr. Martinez thought she saw Sabrina's fingers twitch. Another nurse said she noticed a flicker of movement beneath Sabrina's closed eyelids. Was it the random spasms that sometimes afflict coma patients, or something more? There was no way to be certain without further tests. Tests Gavin refused to authorize. He considered them a waste of resources. That same afternoon, Daniel arrived at the hospital, brandishing the letter from Sabrina. By sheer chance, he found Dr. Martinez in the hallway. "Doctor," he said, his breath quick, "I have reason to believe Sabrina may have indicated a wish to remain on life support for the sake of her baby." Dr. Martinez arched an eyebrow, her stethoscope swaying around her neck. "That's a medical legal matter. I suggest you speak to the hospital's legal team, but time's short." Daniel looked around warily, as though expecting Gavin to leap out of a corner. "I plan to. We may have a hearing before a judge tomorrow morning." Something like relief flickered in Dr. Martinez's expression. "I'm not sure how the judge will rule, but at least it might buy some time." The tension was palpable. Gavin, upon learning of Daniel's intentions, erupted in fury. He confronted Daniel near the vending machines, his face contorted with anger. "This is my wife. I make the decisions," Gavin snarled. "You have no right to meddle." Daniel stood his ground. "When the unborn child's life is at stake and Sabrina's own wishes were documented, it's my duty to act. Even if the letter isn't notarized, a judge may consider it evidence of her intent." Gavin's lips curled in contempt. "You're only stalling the inevitable." Daniel faced him unwavering. "Let a court decide that." For the first time in years, Gavin felt powerless. No boardroom negotiation, no thick wad of cash could guarantee his desired outcome. He could bribe some people, perhaps, but interfering with a judge's ruling was a different beast altogether. And so, with hours left until Sabrina was scheduled to be removed from life support, the stage was set for a legal showdown. Early the next morning, the small county courthouse opened its doors to an impromptu hearing. Gavin's high-priced legal team arrived, along with Daniel. The presiding judge, Honorable Marion Hastings, was known for her meticulous approach and her compassion. She scanned the documents, listened to both sides. Gavin's attorneys argued that as Sabrina's legal spouse, he had the right to make medical decisions. They brought up hospital records showing minimal brain function, emphasizing that Sabrina was unlikely to regain consciousness. They also presented ominous forecasts about the baby's chance of survival. Daniel argued that Sabrina had made her wishes clear in the letter, albeit informally. She cared deeply for her unborn child. She would never have chosen to terminate life support if that child had a chance. Daniel referenced medical ethical guidelines, the existence of advanced directives, and the possibility that Sabrina's condition might improve enough to sustain the pregnancy. Judge Hastings listened intently. She frowned at the informal nature of the letter, but acknowledged that evidence of maternal intent could be significant. Tapping her pen against the bench, she posed questions to both sides, one after another. The hearing was tense, full of legal jargon and emotional undercurrents. At one point, Gavin took the stand. Daniel asked him, "Mr. Blackwood, do you truly believe Sabrina would have wanted to end her life if it meant ending the baby's life as well?" The question sent ripples of unease through the courtroom. Gavin looked briefly caught off guard before regaining composure. "Sabrina and I had multiple discussions about quality of life," he said, sidestepping a direct answer. She wouldn't want to exist in this vegetative state, nor would she want our child to suffer abnormalities due to a non-viable pregnancy. This is about sparing both mother and child from suffering. Daniel gave a slight nod but pressed on, and yet she never wrote any such statement down, did she? "It was our private conversation," Gavin said coolly. The testimony stretched for hours, until finally Judge Hastings declared she needed time to deliberate. She disappeared into her chambers. Gavin and Daniel waited anxiously, along with Dr. Martinez, who had been subpoenaed to testify about Sabrina's medical prognosis. A hush fell over the corridor, broken only by the ticking of a wall clock. Then the judge returned with her ruling. In carefully chosen words, she explained that the letter, though not legally binding, offered enough to question Gavin's unilateral decision. She granted a temporary injunction, preventing the hospital from withdrawing life support for an additional 14 days. During that time, further medical evaluations would be conducted, focusing on both Sabrina's potential for improvement and the viability of the fetus. Gavin's face fell. Daniel exhaled, relief washing over him. Dr. Martinez closed her eyes, silently grateful for the extra time to see if Sabrina might defy the odds. Outside, reporters swarmed, microphones raised. Gavin evaded them, slipping into his limousine, his mind spun with thoughts, the debts, the pressure, the unstoppable meltdown of his finances if he couldn't gain control of Sabrina's estate soon. The 14-day extension was a catastrophic setback. Back at the hospital, Dr. Martinez ordered a new battery of tests. She brought in her obstetric friend, Dr. Anthony Beaumont, to assess the fetus with advanced imaging. The results were startling. The baby appeared to be growing, albeit with some risk factors. Dr. Beaumont estimated that if they could keep Sabrina stable for another 6 to 8 weeks, there was a decent chance the child could be delivered prematurely and still survive with intensive care. That same day, a nurse excitedly approached Dr. Martinez. "I think she moved her eyes," the nurse said, breathless. "It was just a flicker, but I'm certain of it." Dr. Martinez hurried to Sabrina's room. She checked the sedation levels, adjusted the respirator settings, and performed a neurological exam. Over the next hour, a small miracle occurred. Sabrina's eyelids fluttered. It was faint, irregular, but it was there. Dr. Martinez tested pupil reactions, mild reflex responses in Sabrina's hands and feet. Small improvements, but improvements nonetheless. Word spread swiftly. Gavin heard about it while on a phone call, negotiating with a potential buyer for one of his failing restaurants. He ended the call abruptly, telling the prospective buyer he'd phoned back. For a moment, disbelief seized him. This changed everything. If Sabrina emerged from her coma, even partially, she might confirm or deny the rumors swirling around her. She might speak of her own intentions. She might direct her philanthropic trust to new heights, or she might do something altogether unexpected. He felt the foundation of his carefully laid plans quaking beneath him. But Dr. Martinez cautioned that Sabrina was not fully conscious. "This could be just a spontaneous reflex," she told Helena and Daniel, who had gathered in the hallway. "Yet it's more than we saw before. We're not out of the woods, but there's a glimmer of neurological activity returning." Helena's eyes welled with tears. She touched Daniel's hand, gratitude flooding through her. "Maybe this is the sign we needed," she whispered. Daniel nodded, a lump in his throat. "Let's pray it continues." But Gavin, standing at a distance, listened without a word. He had never been one to pray. He believed in power, money, strategy. As he watched Helena embrace Dr. Martinez, a cold dread filled him. If Sabrina woke, everything about his finances, the shady deals, and the motivation behind his push to terminate her life support could be exposed. She might realize he was not the husband she believed him to be. Late that night, the hospital halls were eerily quiet. Gavin slipped Inside Sabrina's room, alone, the machines beeped softly. The respirator hissed with mechanical regularity. He stood by the bed, staring down at the woman he had once claimed to love. She looked fragile, almost ethereal. He remembered the first time he saw her at a charity fundraiser. Her laugh was bright, her spirit magnetic. Had that all been an illusion? Or had he been the illusion, presenting himself as the perfect catch when, in truth, he was drowning in ambition? Leaning over, he spoke softly, as though she could hear him. "I'm sorry it came to this," he muttered. "I thought I could handle everything, but the business got away from me. And then we argued so much about your trust, about what I wanted to do with the expansions. You never understood." He paused, noticing the faintest flicker beneath her eyelids again. His heart kicked in his chest. Was she trying to open her eyes? A surge of panic coursed through him. If she woke now, if she recognized him, what would she say? Would she blame him for giving up? His breath came faster. For a split second, he considered tampering with the machines, pulling a cord or hitting a switch. The monstrous thought nearly overwhelmed him. But even he wasn't prepared to commit outright murder, not in such a direct manner. He quickly backed away, raking his fingers through his hair. "That blink. It means nothing," he muttered, to reassure himself more than anything. "You're still unconscious." But as he turned to leave, a nurse walked in. She eyed him suspiciously. "Is everything all right, Mr. Blackwood?" she asked. He swallowed, nodded stiffly. "Just checking on my wife." The nurse didn't seem convinced, but said nothing as Gavin slipped away. Outside in the hallway, his mind spun with dark possibilities. Meanwhile, inside the room, Sabrina's eyelids trembled again, as though she was fighting her way to the surface of an endless sea of unconsciousness. Days passed. Hospital staff reported slow but incremental signs of improvement in Sabrina. The 14-day extension was ticking down, but it no longer seemed to matter. A judge was unlikely to allow the termination of life support if Sabrina was showing any level of responsiveness. From his hotel suite downtown, he had left the estate to avoid constant questions from Helena Gavin, orchestrated phone calls and conferences, desperately trying to salvage his ailing businesses. Swiss backers demanded immediate returns. The phone rang off the hook. Urgent emails flooded in. He had to juggle everything at once, like a high-wire act with no safety net. Then came a phone call from an unexpected source, Samantha Pierce, an investigative journalist who had once been an old flame of Gavin's. She had uncovered suspicious financial activities linked to him. She threatened to run a story that would destroy Gavin's credibility unless he agreed to an interview. At first, Gavin attempted to buy her off, but Samantha wasn't interested in hush money. She wanted the truth. "Rumor has it you wanted to pull the plug on Sabrina for your own financial gain," Samantha said over the phone. "I have leads suggesting your empire is on the brink of collapse, that you needed her out of the way before she could alter her trust." "Care to comment?" Gavin's stomach churned. "Those rumors are vile," he spat. "But if you must print something, at least get the facts right. My wife was in a vegetative state. I had to make a humane decision." She gave a skeptical laugh. "Humane. Right. I'll be sure to quote you on that." Hanging up, Gavin felt cornered. The world seemed to be caving in around him. He was running out of escape routes. If Sabrina woke, she might rewrite her entire will or direct her philanthropic trust to cut him out entirely. If the press learned the truth, he'd be finished. Panic clawed at his throat, forging an idea so desperate and vile that it made him tremble. He needed to shift the narrative. He needed to look like a grieving hero, not a callous villain. And if that required engineering an accident that ended Sabrina's life despite the court order, so be it. But a flicker of conscience still remained in him, and it clashed violently with his ambition. The final day of the injunction arrived. Tensions were at an all-time high. Helena stayed by Sabrina's bedside, holding her cold hand, whispering prayers. Dr. Martinez and Dr. Beaumont reviewed the latest scans, concluding that while Sabrina's consciousness was still minimal, it had progressed beyond the earlier vegetative state. The fetus was now more stable than expected. The plan was to continue supporting both Sabrina and the pregnancy for as long as medically viable. Gavin, reeling from the knowledge that he couldn't legally force the hospital to pull the plug, made a final, desperate appearance at the hospital. Helena cornered him in the hallway. "This is good news, Gavin," she said, tears glistening in her eyes. "She's showing improvement." He forced a smile, trying to appear relieved. "Yes, wonderful," he murmured. Helena frowned at his tepid response. "You don't sound happy," he stammered. "Of course I'm happy. It's just, this is so unexpected." Before Helena could press him further, a flurry of activity erupted from Sabrina's room. Nurses rushed in, and Dr. Martinez's voice rang out with a note of excitement. Helena and Gavin exchanged a glance before hurrying into the room. Sabrina's eyes were open. The once blank expression on her face now held a flicker of recognition, small, fragile, but undoubtedly there. Everyone froze. The monitors beeped steadily, her breathing regulated by the respirator. Then, with painstaking slowness, Sabrina blinked. Once, twice. Her gaze moved, struggling to focus. Helena gasped, clutching the bed rail. "Sabrina, can you hear me?" Dr. Martinez gently tested Sabrina's responsiveness. "Sabrina, if you can hear us, blink once for yes." Pause. Sabrina blinked. The nurse quickly dabbed tears from her own eyes. Gavin's world spun. This was the moment he dreaded. She was regaining awareness. She might recall events leading to the accident, or sense his betrayal. Even if she remembered nothing yet, the simple fact that she was conscious enough to blink changed the entire equation. Helena, tears streaming, leaned close. "We've been waiting for this." "Ah, my dear child, you're safe now." She gently brushed hair away from Sabrina's forehead. Dr. Martinez signaled for calm. "She's still very weak. Let's keep the environment peaceful." She turned to Sabrina. "Try not to be afraid. You've been in an accident, but you're in a hospital, and we're taking care of you." Sabrina blinked in acknowledgement. Standing in the corner, Gavin stared in silence. He couldn't quite process how this impacted his entire plan. Sabrina's survival threatened everything he'd built, but seeing her awake triggered a confusing rush of relief and guilt. He couldn't deny the magnitude of the moment. Within hours, the press got wind of Sabrina's stirring. Cameras flashed outside the hospital. In a dramatic turn, the woman once left for dead, pregnant and comatose had begun to show signs of life. The coverage shifted from the heartless millionaire pulling the plug to the improbable story of a miraculous awakening. Over the next few days, Sabrina's consciousness inched forward. She could blink for yes and no, wiggle her fingers, and respond to basic questions with faint gestures. The hospital staff celebrated each victory as though it were their own, and in a sense, it was. Helena kept vigil at the bedside, reading Sabrina stories, updating her on small details of the outside world. Dr. Martinez and Dr. Beaumont conducted daily exams, measuring Sabrina's ability to handle the pregnancy. By some grace, the baby's heartbeat remained strong. One evening, as Helena stepped out to speak with Dr. Martinez, Sabrina was left alone with Gavin. He stood over her, searching her face for any sign that she might recall certain truths. She blinked up at him, confusion etched in her eyes. "Sabrina," he said softly, feeling a pang of conflicting emotions. "You can hear me, right?" She blinked once for yes. He swallowed. "Do you remember the accident?" 2 blinks, no. "It's fine," he said. "We'll figure it all out later." The machines continued their steady hum. An unspoken tension filled the room. He wondered if she could sense his guilt, if her returning consciousness would inevitably lead her to uncover the real reason he had been so quick to sign those termination papers. Unable to handle the pressure, Gavin muttered an excuse and left, not wanting to witness her fragile attempts at communication. Samantha Pierce's expose hit the internet one morning like a thunderbolt. The headline, "Millionaire Husband's Motives Questioned in Pregnant Wife's Life Support Battle." The article laid out Gavin's financial struggles, hinted at suspicious circumstances surrounding Sabrina's accident, and dredged up rumors of an affair he'd allegedly had while Sabrina was teaching in Connecticut. Samantha didn't have absolute proof, but she had enough circumstantial evidence to make a scandal stick. Social media erupted in outrage. Calls flooded Gavin's phone from investors, board members, and business partners, all concerned about the negative publicity. Stocks tied to Gavin's holdings dipped slightly. He felt the walls closing in. At the hospital, Helena confronted Gavin, holding her smartphone with trembling hands. "What on earth is this, Gavin? Did you truly have such deep financial troubles? Did you sabotage Sabrina?" "What? No, that's ridiculous," Gavin snapped, but his voice lacked conviction. "Samantha's out for sensationalism. She claims the police found no skid marks at the accident site, that the brakes on Sabrina's car had been tampered with." Helena's voice shook, furious and terrified. Did you do something?" Gavin's eyes flashed with desperation. "Mother, you know me. I'm not capable of that." But she wasn't convinced. She stormed away, tears of betrayal in her eyes. As the hospital corridors whirled around him, Gavin realized that if Sabrina regained enough memory, she might recall something damning. He wasn't certain he had caused the crash. An accomplice might have been involved, a sabotage orchestrated by the Swiss financiers who threatened him. But the rumor alone was lethal. Then, as though fate decided to twist the knife deeper, a nurse rushed up, calling for Dr. Martinez. "Sabrina's trying to speak." Everyone hurried to her room. Helena, Daniel, Dr. Beaumont, Dr. Martinez, and Gavin trailing behind with dread. Sabrina lay there, her lips forming faint movements. Her voice came out as a rasp, barely audible. "Doctor." Martinez leaned in, placing a stethoscope near her mouth to amplify any whisper. Sabrina's eyes darted, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. Wah, she couldn't complete the word. "What, baby?" Helena clasped Sabrina's hand. "Yes, dear, you're still pregnant. The baby is still here." A flicker of relief crossed Sabrina's face. She tried to form more words, but exhaustion overcame her. She closed her eyes, panting softly through parted lips. Dr. Martinez insisted everyone give her space. The next day, Sabrina managed to speak a few words again, though scattered and weak. She asked about the accident. She asked if Gavin was all right. Each question caused fresh pangs of guilt in Gavin, who found himself incapable of meeting her gaze. Days blended into nights as Sabrina's strength returned in increments. She began to recall fragments of her life, fleeting glimpses that made her question everything. In whispered conversations with Helena, Sabrina learned that Gavin had signed documents to remove her life support before the court intervened. Though Helena tried to soften the blow, the truth pierced Sabrina's heart, leaving her with a stunned look that turned to sorrow. She struggled to reconcile it with the Gavin she once knew. Meanwhile, Gavin's empire teetered on the brink of collapse. The scandal unleashed by Samantha Pierce showed no signs of abating. Unannounced, Gavin marched into Sabrina's hospital room one quiet afternoon. She was dozing, but stirred awake when she heard the door open. He approached slowly, as if entering a sacred place he wasn't sure he was allowed. "Sabrina," he whispered. Her eyes blinked open, focusing on him. She tried to speak. "W-Y, end." Her voice was strained, her question incomplete yet clear enough. "Why did you want to end my life support?" Gavin lowered himself into a chair beside the bed. He wanted to reach for her hand, but didn't dare. His mind raced with excuses, yet something inside him, perhaps the last shred of decency, compelled him to tell her at least part of the truth. "I didn't think you'd recover," he began softly. "The doctor said there was almost no chance. I couldn't bear seeing you like that, on the machines. And the baby, they weren't sure it would survive." She stared at him, tears slowly forming, her lips parted, her breath ragged. "Baby had chance." He closed his eyes. "I know that now. I was scared. I handled everything badly." He couldn't bring himself to admit the full extent of his motives, that he had debts so large he believed Sabrina's philanthropic trust was the only way out, that he had never truly welcomed the idea of fatherhood, seeing it as a distraction from building his empire. But Sabrina wasn't fully blind to his turmoil. Though her memory was patchy, she recalled disputes with Gavin, how he always put business first, how he talked about the trust as though it was a threat to his financial independence. She mustered her strength and rasped, "Couldn't wait for baby." Gavin pressed his lips together, tears threatening to break free. "I made a mistake," he whispered. "I'm sorry." A flash of heartbreak in her eyes cut him to the core, though she couldn't speak any more words. Her trembling told him enough. This was beyond a simple apology. She had awakened to a shattered marriage, a husband who had all but abandoned her when she needed him most. Even so, the baby's heartbeat was steady, a sign of hope amidst the wreckage. Throughout the following week, Dr. Beaumont decided the time was nearing when the baby could be delivered safely by C-section if Sabrina's recovery plateaued. The risk remained significant, but waiting too long could complicate Sabrina's own healing. Sabrina agreed to the plan, blinking yes when asked if she wanted to continue. She managed to articulate a few short sentences now, a testament to her remarkable progress. Helena supported the decision wholeheartedly, while Daniel handled any legalities that arose. Gavin found himself cornered. He couldn't challenge Sabrina's choices now that she was legally competent, at least on a limited basis. The courts would side with her wishes to protect the baby. Despite everything, a swirl of guilt compelled Gavin to remain by Sabrina's side during the day of the surgery. He paced the hospital waiting area, ignoring the side eyes from staff who knew what he had tried to do. Finally, a nurse emerged with a weary smile. "Mother and child are stable," she said. "Both are in recovery." A wave of emotions surged through Gavin. He went to see Sabrina, though Helena hovered protectively. Sabrina lay in a recovery room, pale but conscious, and the fourth attached to her arm. Her eyes flicked open at the sound of the door. She didn't speak immediately, but her gaze fell on Gavin with a mixture of relief and unresolved pain. He approached her bedside. "You did it," he murmured. "He's a boy, right?" She nodded weakly. Tears of joy and sorrow welled in her eyes. That's wonderful," he said, though the words felt inadequate. She tried to whisper, "See, baby, they're bringing him soon," a nurse interjected gently. "He's in neonatal care for a short while, just to ensure he's strong enough. But so far he looks healthy." In that silent moment, Gavin felt a shift in himself. The baby's survival, Sabrina's miraculous awakening, these events uprooted the cynical calculations that had guided him. He couldn't justify what he had done. And now, the new life in the world was a symbol of hope that mocked his darkest intentions. Whether he was ready or not, he had become a father. With Sabrina's health on a slow but steady incline, she was moved out of the ICU into a private room. Her baby boy, whom she named Oliver, grew stronger in the NICU. Helena practically camped out at the hospital, helping where she could. Daniel visited often, ensuring legal matters were in order. He discreetly finalized documents that secured Sabrina's philanthropic trust, preventing Gavin from accessing it. The day Sabrina was allowed to hold Oliver for the first time, she cried softly, feeling his tiny heartbeat against her chest. Gavin stood in the corner, uncertain, hands twitching at his sides. Part of him longed to share in that moment, but the weight of his betrayal kept him back. Sabrina lifted her gaze to meet his. In a voice still weak but clearer than before, she asked, "Do you want to hold him?" Gavin hesitated, a swirl of emotions churning inside him. "If you'll let me," he managed. He approached cautiously, taking Oliver into his arms. The baby stirred, opened his tiny eyes. In that fleeting moment, Gavin felt an unfamiliar warmth flood him, a sense of awe. For the first time in his life, he realized that no amount of money or power could replicate the feeling of holding his newborn son. A tear escaped his eye, unbidden. Sabrina watched him closely, and though she was moved by Gavin's tenderness, she couldn't forget the cold truth of what had almost happened. She closed her eyes, letting the bittersweet ache wash over her. She had Oliver now, and she was alive, yet everything else in her world had collapsed. 2 weeks later, Sabrina was discharged from the hospital, still needing outpatient therapy, but stable enough to leave. Oliver remained in NICU for observation. Sabrina decided to stay with Helena, rather than return to the Blackwood estate with Gavin. He lingered, uncertain of his role. Meanwhile, Samantha Pierce's expose had opened a Pandora's box for law enforcement. Investigations were launched into the suspicious circumstances of Sabrina's accident. Evidence surfaced that her car's brake lines had indeed been tampered with. Gavin's financial ties to unscrupulous lenders drew suspicion. Though nothing definitively pinned the sabotage on Gavin, the cloud of doubt remained. Desperate to salvage his empire, Gavin made a series of deals, selling off assets at a loss. Pressure mounted. But no matter how he maneuvered, it seemed the damage was done. Key investors pulled out, bankers demanded repayment, projects stalled. On a rainy afternoon, he found himself signing documents that effectively dismantled large portions of his business portfolio. The once mighty empire shrank into a shadow of its former self. That evening, he asked to see Sabrina. She agreed, though Helena insisted on being nearby. They met in Helena's drawing room, the same place Sabrina had once worn a radiant smile, discussing her charitable plans. Now she was dressed in a loose sweater, her complexion still pale, but a fierce determination radiated from her. He explained the financial ruin, how his empire was in shambles. She listened in silence. Then he asked, "Will you consider letting me be part of Oliver's life?" Sabrina's expression darkened with pain and betrayal. She recalled the moment she'd learned he'd signed her death warrant, the nights he paced in her hospital room, the fear in his eyes that she would wake and ruin his plan. And yet, she saw the father in him who had held Oliver with genuine tenderness. "I won't lie," she said, haltingly, her voice still somewhat raspy. "I'm angry you gave up on me, on our baby. But Oliver has no fault in this. If he wants a relationship with his father, I won't stand in the way. But understand," she swallowed hard, "our marriage. I can't just pretend everything's all right." He looked down. "I understand. I'm sorry." Tears threatened to spill from her eyes, but she steadied herself. "Prove it," she whispered. "Prove you can change, for Oliver's sake. Maybe, in time, I can forgive. But that time isn't now." Gavin respected her decision. He stepped away from the Blackwood estate, securing a modest apartment nearby. He visited Oliver in the NICU whenever Sabrina allowed, carefully respecting her boundaries. Over weeks, Sabrina grew stronger physically, while emotionally she grappled with the trauma of the accident and betrayal. She attended therapy, leaning on Helena, Daniel, and even Dr. Martinez for support. Little by little, Oliver grew healthier. Finally, the day came when Oliver was cleared to go home. Sabrina held him close, tears in her eyes, grateful for this precious life she had fought so hard to save. For a moment, She remembered the stark beep of hospital machines, the unstoppable nights she floated in the coma, the faint echoes of voices urging her to let go. But she had clung to life, perhaps through sheer will or divine grace, and now her reward was a fragile new life in her arms. Gavin arrived in the corridor, carrying a small teddy bear for Oliver. He paused when he saw Sabrina and Helena waiting by the discharge desk. He offered a small, tentative smile. She hesitated before allowing him to approach, and he gently placed the teddy bear beside Oliver's car seat. "Thank you," Sabrina said quietly. She let him stroke Oliver's cheek, though the distance between her and Gavin remained palpable. Helena observed, relief and concern etched on her features. As they walked to the parking lot, the paparazzi lurked, cameras flashing. Headlines already spun their stories: miraculous mother survives, baby safe, and millionaire husband on the rocks. But Sabrina no longer cared about gossip. She had endured too much to let it rattle her now. Her focus was Oliver's well-being, her own healing, and forging a life free from the manipulations that had nearly destroyed her. Gavin, for his part, had a long road of redemption ahead. He had to prove not only to Sabrina, but to himself, that he could be more than a heartless strategist. The bond with his son offered a chance at that redemption if he had the courage to seize it. From the cold corridors of Providence Memorial Hospital to the day a fragile mother and newborn were finally released, this story has shown how a single blink or the lack of it can shift the balance of life. Love and hope, betrayal, suspicion, and heartbreak lurked in every shadow, yet a spark of life managed to break through the darkness. Sabrina's choice to keep fighting even when she couldn't speak, and her unwavering love for her child created a turning point no amount of money could manipulate. Now, as the new journey unfolds, you're reminded of life's fragile power. It can be misused, or it can spark redemption. If you found yourself caught in the twists of this tale, let that spark illuminate your own life. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can continue bringing you stories that stir the heart and soul.